We are part of the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. Every county in Arizona has a cooperative extension office, and you may be familiar with some of our other programs, such as 4-H, food safety, nutrition education, STEM and commercial horticulture, and small acreage support. Master Gardeners provide science-based horticulture information, and tonight's presentation is on backyard vegetable garden irrigation. Our presenter tonight is Bill Maines. He is a retired speech pathologist who professes he inherited his interest in growing from his father and grandmother. After retiring in Southern California, he attended classes on composting, raising earthworms, growing tomatoes, and gardening with the square foot method. Once he moved to Chino with his wife, Bill became a master gardener in 2017 and has volunteered installing drip irrigation systems at the Chino Valley Head Start School and at the Good Samaritan Society. You don't get to see him often, but Bill is also one of our valued members of the Master Gardener Speakers Bureau, and he's always with us. He's just behind the scenes. So tonight he gets to be front and center. Bill, it's all yours. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Tricia. Yes, it's on backyard vegetable garden irrigation. And this, of course, is where you can reach us for any questions that you have. The topics that I'm covering tonight are going to be why irrigation is important to the backyard vegetable gardener, the types of irrigation systems, choosing the right irrigation system, and maintaining and troubleshooting your irrigation system. Topics covered in previous presentations that I won't be covering, and you can find them at this particular website address, is the landscape irrigation systems, fruit, tree, berry, and grape irrigation systems, and rainwater collection, gravity-fed irrigation systems. Interesting topics, but not what we're covering tonight, but you can check our website for those. What is irrigation and why is it important? Seems like a topic that's very appropriate this time of year. Irrigation is the art and science of applying the right amount of water to keep your vegetables healthy, growing, and producing a tasty crop. Too much or too little water is probably the cause of more failures in the home vegetable garden than any other growing condition. This is a quote by Mel Bartholomew, who is the author of the Square Foot Gardening Method. Proper irrigation is particularly important for backyard vegetable gardeners in the West because the climate is characterized by low rainfall and a long dry season, or both. Vegetable crops are not drought tolerant. Gardens in most areas of Arizona and California require that the soil be kept moist with regular irrigation during the entire crop cycle. Maintaining uniform and soil moisture can benefit the garden in many ways. It aids in seed emergence. It reduces soil crusting. It reduces wilting and checking of growth and transplants. Increases fruit size of tomato, cucumber, and melon, and prevents premature ripening of beans, peas, and sweet corn. It also maintains uniform growth and improves the quality and yields of most crops. While they are growing, vegetable crops need about an inch of water per week in the form of rainwater, irrigation, or both. As a rule, it will be necessary to irrigate your vegetable garden 2 to 4 times a week in the warmest and driest months of the summer, and once or twice per week, or even less in other seasons. Ideally, wet the soil to just beyond the bottom of the root system at each watering if possible. Ideally, adjust the amount and frequency of irrigation according to the water use and the root depth of each type of vegetable that you grow. When this is not possible, which is often the case, adjust your irrigation to meet the needs of the shallow-rooted crops, which is the root zone from 6 to 12 inches. Because of the medium and deep-rooted crops will mostly get enough water. They have quite a few roots in that particular area as well. The same rule applies anywhere that topsoil is shallow, such as in raised beds or in many urban properties. Deep-rooted crops and shallower crops do have different watering needs, particularly in the depth and the penetration of water. And you can see some variations here with lettuce on the left and your sweet corn on the right. To manage and schedule irrigation effectively, you must know how deep and how long soil remains moist after an irrigation cycle or a series of cycles. In the case of a vegetable garden in which digging a hole could damage the roots of the plant, pushing a long screwdriver or soil probe serves as a good indicator of water penetration. So if you took a class for a master gardener, they taught you that you can push a metal probe down through the soil, particularly for trees. And when it stops, you know, that's how far down that your soil is wetted. It's a good thing in the vegetable garden as well. Types of irrigation systems. There's hand irrigation, which with square foot gardening, they recommend using a cup. There's watering can, which I've used a lot, handheld shower nozzle, or a water wand. Shower nozzle I've used in my garden. The water wand I used to use at the greenhouses in Chino. Furrow, basin, or berm irrigation is effective for some type of plants. Sprinkler irrigation, fixed or hose end, can be effective, but there are some drawbacks. Soaker hose and micro irrigation, which includes drip, bubblers and spitters. I'll explain what those are in a bit. Using the, I lost my place. Using a cup to irrigate a small 4x4 bed is very cheap and fairly easy, but it's difficult to do in larger gardens in warm summer months. Watering cans are a good way to keep a close eye and customize delivery of exact amounts of water, but difficult in a large garden in hotter weather. A handheld shower nozzle or water wand can be used to duplicate natural rainfall. A long-handled water wand can place the water at the base of the plant and avoid wetting the foliage, which often happens with sprinklers. This slide, we have a shower nozzle with adjustable settings. You want it on the softest, most gentle shower that you can so it doesn't damage plants. And then there's a little variety of different colors of the handheld water wands that have a similar type of head at the end. The furrow system is often used for application of water for commercial agricultural purposes, and is also used in backyard vegetable gardens. In fact, that's what I used. That's what my dad taught me. That's what my grandmother used. We made long rows and put furrows in between, and we usually watered with a hose. If we couldn't do that, like my grandmother's yard was way behind her house, we used to use buckets. Basins can be used for fruit trees, grapes, and other vining berries. The advantage of this type of system is there's very little equipment cost other than a long hose but unfortunately, this technique is subject to a great deal of evaporation in hot climates. Watering in the cool of the morning will reduce this, however. Here we have a picture of a very nice furrow next to a row. And you try to grade your garden so that it kind of tilts and the water will flow down the furrow like here. The basin berm can be made into a moat, often used for new tree plantings, but you can use it for grapevines and other fruiting crops. Fixed sprinkler irrigation is mostly used for lawns and permanent landscaping, but it can be used for vegetable gardens. But a lot of times it's not positioned ideally for your vegetable garden, especially when you rotate your crops in order to prevent diseases. That's why hose-in sprinklers are convenient to use, easy to reposition for maximum flexibility of delivery. Sprinklers are one of the simplest ways to apply water evenly over a large garden, and it's essentially producing artificial rainfall. Sprinklers do waste water when wind and evaporation carry away water. And sprinklers, unfortunately, water hardscapes and the soil between plants, causing water evaporation and weed stimulation. It's probably one of the biggest reasons not to use a sprinkler, all the extra weeds. They also can foster disease-causing organisms when they're on wet leaves and the stems of the plant. Watering in the cool of the morning, again, will reduce evaporation, as well as allow leaves to dry during the later warmth of the day. Soaker hoses are a form of drip irrigation and can be used to advantage if rows of plants are short, 20 to 25 feet max. For longer rows or on sloping soil, soaker hoses cannot be expected to provide as uniform an irrigation as that provided by a true drip irrigation system. Although much less expensive and easier to deploy, soaker hoses deteriorate in the weather much faster than the true drip irrigation system. Micro irrigation is the most water efficient irrigation system in use today. Micro irrigation systems include drip, spitter, which is essentially a mini sprinkler, and bubbler, which bubbles out more water than the drip emitter, and it's kind of a medium water delivery system for the micro irrigation. Perhaps the best established micro irrigation system is a drip or trickle irrigation, in which a tiny emitter is attached to plastic tubing to apply water to the soil surface alongside individual plants. Water is applied at a low rate, sometimes drop by drop, but at a high frequency with the objective of maintaining optimal soil water availability in the immediate root zone while leaving most of the soil volume dry. This slide shows a conventional drip tape system with built-in emitters spaced at a predetermined length based on a typical plant spacing. Often it's 6 to 12 inches, sometimes 18 inches. A basic drip system has three parts. The control head, which includes a flow control valve, a pressure regulator, and a filter. A transmission system of flexible plastic pipes or hose, usually polyethylene tubing, and the emitters. Now in the upper left, we have some controllers. The one on the far left is attached to a hose bib, and you control the timing of the supply to the drip irrigation system. The one in the middle is the one that's often used, more complicated. It's actually Wi-Fi controlled. And some people have very elaborate landscape irrigation systems that use this, and they can control it even when they're across the country. And the one on the right is, again, a battery operated one like the one on the left. They're battery operated. But you have to get a special kind of solenoid when you're using battery type controllers because they use a lower voltage. On the right, we have pressure regulators because the pressure from your hose bib is usually for your house. The pressure for the water in your house is much too strong for these low pressure, low volume systems, and it'll blow everything apart. So you have to get the right size based on your pressure in your hose bib. Down the lower part, we have some examples of emitters. These are pressure regulated emitters, and they're color coded. And let's see. There we go. They're color coded, but you got to keep in mind, and I'll mention it later again, that every company has different color coding for their drip emitters, and a particular color in one manufacturer does not have the same gallons per hour emission as another manufacturer. So you got to keep an eye on that. We have a manifold here that has several different connectors for different spaghetti lines or small diameter lines that go right to your plants. And all of them are going out at the same gallons per hour. I've heard it said that the flag emitters that are right below that are very fragile, and those flags break off pretty easily. Now you need to have filters on your system because they're very important, because you need to keep the water clean of debris and dirt as well as algae, because that would interfere the flow of water through your system. Now, the main water supply to your drip irrigation system comes in pipe or polyethylene. You can also do it in PVC, and there's a system that's outlined in the reference section of this particular presentation from Utah State University, where they just use PVC. This polyethylene tubing is available in different lengths. They're blank. You need to insert the emitters. There's actually no standard sizes between different companies. So again, you need to get all of your parts or get a kit from one particular company, one particular manufacturer, and get extra fittings for them. It's all coiled up and it tends to stay in a curve like that. So when you install it, you need to stretch it out and let it be in the sun for a while, and then it'll relax and you can put in straight lines. It'll be easier to handle. To the right, we see a close-up of a section of poly supply pipe with a piece of spaghetti attached to it. That's how the actual emitters function with the spaghetti. Right below that, you can see where the emitter is at the end of the spaghetti, but it can be placed in the supply half-inch supply tube, and then the spaghetti attached to that as well. It doesn't matter where it is in that particular position. The lower left, we have inline emitter tubing. This is a little bit stronger, and it has pre-installed emitters at standard spacings of 6-inch, 12-inch, 18 inches, and up. This is a little bit more resilient than what we've sometimes find is drip tape. It's kind of a flattened tape, and it has emitters in it, but it doesn't hold up as well. If you don't want to go with poly tubing and separate emitters, this is a good choice. Now, emitters are built into or attached to the 1/2-inch diameter tubing or attached to a smaller diameter flexible plastic water delivery line, which then carries the water to each plant. Drip irrigation offers several advantages to home gardeners. Water is placed more accurately and efficiently in the root zone. Water is applied at a slow rate, and this reduces water loss from runoff, and plant foliage remains dry, thus reducing potential for disease. Dry soil between plants permits work in the garden during irrigation events, so you can actually work in your garden while your emitters are running. Disadvantages of drip irrigation are the added cost of irrigation equipment and the occasional problems of the tiny drip orifices plugging up and impeding water delivery. However, the advantages generally outweigh the disadvantages, and a drip irrigation system, when correctly installed and maintained, can be very helpful to the serious gardener. In contrast to gardeners, drip irrigation systems can be efficiently operated any time of the day, since they emit water directly to the soil surface down to the root zone of the plant. And this also prevents germination of weed seeds between plants. Choosing the right system for you. Factors to consider is the size of your garden. A small to medium garden, you can water by hand easily. Medium to large gardens, you can use furrows, sprinklers, soaker hoses, or drip. Your soil type is important, and the types of plants you grow is a consideration as well. And the biggest concern of all in choosing this is your budget. Now we have a little image here showing two extremes of water movement through the soil. These are not ideal soils for a garden. One is a sandy soil on the left side, and the one on the right is a clay soil. Clay soils hold more water than do sandy soils. The sandy soil is not ideal because the water drains out too quickly and it's not held in the root zone for any length of time. The clay soil, which holds too much water in the root zone for too long, can cause the plants to actually suffocate. Loamy soils are the ideal. It's an intermediate capacity to hold some water but drain as well. And it's ideal for the management of water in a vegetable garden. Your choice of irrigation depends on the types of plants you decide to grow. Shallow-rooted plants have root systems in the top 6 to 12 inches of soil. And the examples of those are cabbage, cauliflower, lettuce, celery, sweet corn, onion, white potato, and radish. All types of irrigation will work, and hand watering will be more than adequate if that's your choice for these shallow plants. Here's a graphic that shows, and a chart that shows the various root depths of different vegetable crops. As you see in the figure on the left, which I think it's a antique seed catalog from Park Seed, shows the potatoes are very shallow. Corn is pretty shallow. Getting into some medium, an eggplant, and deeper root systems are tomato and pumpkin. It's more detailed in the chart on the right, and you'll find these kind of charts in, at least I found them in the Master Gardener handbooks, but you can find them online as well. These are guidelines. This if you want to maximize the growth of your plants, and maybe you have a particular type of plant that you like to grow, perennials particularly, they put down deeper roots. You may need to give special attention to those, and that's one of the ways that the drip irrigation comes in handy. When you have a special problem and your garden and your soil don't usually support it as well, sometimes the drip irrigation will give you more control. Now, moderately deep-rooted crops are those with the main root system in the top 1 to 2 feet of soil. There is some overlap with the first category of shallow. Examples are snap beans, carrot, cucumber, eggplant, peas, pepper, and summer squash. The ideal system allows a longer infiltration time in order to reach the medium root zones. Furrow and drip irrigation work quite well for this. They're better than the hand watering or the sprinkler. Furrow and drip irrigation allow for even longer infiltration times to reach deeper root zones of the deep-rooted crops. However, the main root system is in the top 2 to 4 feet of soil, and the examples are asparagus, globe artichoke, cantaloupe, pumpkin, tomato, and watermelon. It means that the furrow or a berm basin will allow a longer filtration time, but because it's just sitting on the surface like that and it's all, put in at once, it allows excessive evaporation. So the drip irrigation is probably the best for this. Budget considerations. If you have a small budget, hand watering is the most inexpensive system, needing as little as a bucket of water, a cup, a watering can, a hose, topping out with maybe an adjustable water nozzle with or without a long handled watering wand. And you can get by with $5 to $10 for this kind of setup. Furrows take just a bit of time with a hoe to shape the soil around your plants and a long hose or bucket to deliver water, and that's pretty cheap as well. Low cost. If your budget is a little larger, then a sprinkler system can be set up for maybe $20 for a hose-in sprinkler. There's a lot of different varieties. Maybe $100 for a simple fixed sprinkler system like that used for lawns, like the reciprocating ones that go around. If your budget is medium to large, consider a drip irrigation system. A basic do-it-yourself kit for a medium garden is in the $100 to $200 range. A professionally designed and installed fully automatic drip irrigation system may cost $1,000 to several $1,000s, and that would cover a large vegetable garden. For a large vegetable garden drip system, you should consult a professional to get actual costs. And watch the videos that I've listed at the end of this presentation. They'll be in the slides that are available as well on our website after the presentation. Particularly watch the one from Johnny's Seeds to get an idea of what is involved in installing the drip irrigation system. Hand watering, furrow basin or berm watering, hose-ins, sprinklers, and soaker hoses require replacement, but no significant installation. Do-it-yourself drip irrigation is suggested for small to medium vegetable gardens or even part of a large vegetable garden. It's easy to do it yourself at that size, and even if it's just part of your garden that you think needs extra attention or more controlled water conditions, then I would go ahead and try and do it yourself. Of course, you would have to hire a professional for any kind of year-round landscape plants, irrigation, and large vegetable gardens, but sometimes they can integrate the two, and you can save some of the main costs for controllers and underground wiring. The basic steps for a do-it-yourself installation. Number one is determine your water source, both the type and the location. the location in regards in relationship to your vegetable garden, because you have to get the water to your supply lines. You need to check your water pressure because drip irrigation is a low pressure delivery system, and it usually requires an inline pressure reducer. Map your garden space so you know how long the lines you need, where they have to be, and where you need the different emitters with the different delivery rates. Need to decide whether it's going to be a permanent or seasonal installation. If it's permanent, you may want to put it underground. Digging is required, but there's a problem with that because it's hard to see. And if there's any kind of problems or leaks, if it's above ground, it's easily accessible for both monitoring as well as repair, but it can be a tripping hazard. So be careful where you put those lines or put them very shallow in the ground. You need to determine the plants you'll grow, and this has to do with the root depth. Although not to scale, this graphic is an example of the basic components of a drip system, illustrating some of the components for watering landscape plants. The same components are used for vegetable gardens, and you'll see here, for a landscape, they usually have a controller with underground wiring to a junction box. But if you're doing a very small garden or a temporary seasonal setup, you can often just plug all your stuff into the hose bib as I showed you on that other slide. And you don't need a timer, you just time it on your watch or your phone. But these are the components. You need hose faucet, waterproof connectors, control valves, a pressure regulator in line, and then you have your supply tube. And you usually put a flush cap on the end so you can clean out the whole system, usually at the beginning of the season and end of the season. And then you have your micro tube with emitters. Emitters can be in the supply line and then the spaghetti attached, or they can be at the end of the spaghetti. Either way works. It's useful to remember the controllers aren't necessary on the simplest systems. You can just hook up the drip irrigation components to your garden hose with a quick disconnect hose coupler and manually turn on your water and time it with your phone or your mic. I use the microwave. And you time how long you want your emitters to run based on their delivery rate. The do-it-yourself kits come in different sizes with all the parts included. And they usually go by the size of your garden in square foot. Typical parts are available at nurseries, home improvement centers, as well as online. And the important thing to remember about building your own particular system is that you need to get extra parts because you're going to make mistakes. We're going to put holes in the wrong places and have to plug them back up. And there's little parts for that. You're going to lose little parts, and you're going to need to make adjustments to your plan after you get it out there sometimes. And you need to get all the parts of the same brand. If you get different brands, the parts won't match up and they won't fit together very well. Every manufacturer uses different methods of coding their emitters for drip rate, and they're in gallons per hour. Help and advice in choosing kits and parts, that's available at the cooperative extension websites from across the country and at Johnny's Seeds online. In addition, there's no lack of information about selecting and installing a drip irrigation system from YouTube to manufacturers' websites and to home improvement websites. Maintaining a drip irrigation system. Drip irrigation and other irrigation systems are no better than their management if you don't keep an eye on them. If you just ignore them, like most people do their landscape irrigation systems, you're going to have problems. You need to inspect to make sure any water filters are clean on supply hoses and poly tubing before operation, and maybe once a week or every couple of weeks during the season. You need to inspect your system during operation so you can see if something's plugged or there's a leak that's spraying across your garden. And the best way to do that is actually be out there when it's running. Emitters can be clogged by algae, sand, salt, or debris and not perform very well. And you can repair leaks or damage to hoses and your tubing. Problems are common to all irrigation systems. All our plants not getting enough water. Signs that plants are wilting during the day and don't recover by the morning. Some plants will wilt during the day and at the end of the day, but by morning they've completely recovered. That's normal. But if they don't recover by morning, it's usually underwatering. Leaves can turn yellow and curl. And the new leaves that come in are smaller than previous leaves, and plants are stunted. When you're getting too much water, plants can have a lot of the same symptoms of underwatering, but the plants usually don't dry out. Another sign of too much water is water pooling in areas of the garden or wetting non-plant areas outside the garden and on hardscape. Key points to remember. Choose an irrigation method that suits your personality and your budget. Do you like to be with your plants every day? I do. Do you like to talk to your plants? I do sometimes. Do you care for each one a little bit differently? Yeah, I do. The main thing is don't water too much or too little. If you have an installed drip irrigation system, make sure you monitor the operation and the effect of your irrigation system. To learn more about drip irrigation and experiment on a small scale, if you plan to do it yourself, take advantage of the resources online if you want to try drip irrigation. Are there any questions?
Bill, we've got quite a few questions. They were coming on in.
Okay.
So, with the dry air we have around here, is wetting the leaves bad?
Wetting the leaves isn't bad if they'll dry after. So what you're doing then is kind of giving them, like your body sweats and cools you off. That can help, especially when it's really hot, it gets in the hundreds. Yeah, give them a little shower, but do it in the early morning or maybe during the hottest part of the day. Never do it in the late part of the day or the evening, because the water will sit on the plants overnight and then fungus can grow.
And it causes diseases as well, besides fungus.
Yeah, fungus and diseases. It'll kill your tomatoes quicker than anything.
Can you combine furrows with drip irrigation?
Yes, you can. You can use the hand watering systems and the furrow irrigation. You can use for anything, but the only thing there is you're going to lose more water through evaporation for furrows. So if it has to sit there a long time for deeper rooted crops, I would suggest not using it and using a drip irrigation.
Okay, but they were asking if you could combine them together, and I guess
Yeah.
I would ask if there was a benefit.
Not a particular benefit that I can think of. Because if you have drip irrigation, you have the cost already.
Mhm.
And with the furrows, it's low cost. It's the main thing. But like I say, if it has to sit there for a very long time for the water to infiltrate the deeper layers, it gives the surface area of the water will evaporate a lot more water. So you can do it. I like to combine drip irrigation with hand watering, because then I can get out and I can spot which plants maybe need a little bit more. And like I say, I like to treat each plant individually. And so, plus then I can give it a shower if it's hot. And the showers help. The drip irrigation doesn't particularly help the foliage when it's really hot. And there's been plenty of times where I've tried to use misters, real fine showers, anything to kind of cool the plants off when they start to wilt in the heat, and they're not the usual ones that wilt.
Okay, with the timer hooked up to the hose bib, do you leave the water on all the time?
If you got a good hose bib and it doesn't leak, yeah, that's what I used to do all the time in California. I always did that. And what I did is I set up a manifold. Sometimes you can put a brass Y on it, and you can have your one hose that you use for other reasons and or other things on that, and then your drip irrigation supply hose on the other one. I even had 4 set up at one time for different zones in my garden, and I just left the faucet on all the time.
And I've done the same thing in my very early days up here. If you practice crop rotation, how does drip irrigation play into the planning of crop placement?
Well, what you would have to do is probably it's going to be sitting on top of the ground. Most of this, you're not going to have a permanent installation in that case. You would have to modify it for each season.
It does make it tougher when you're a good vegetable gardener and you're rotating, but at the same time, you want a nice drip system for everything. So
yeah, you can put in what you can do is you can leave all your main supply lines if you're going down rows or in particular parts of the bed, and you can actually change the spacing of your emitters by what you told me earlier this evening is called dumb plugs. You can plug up the lines and then put them at different spacings. Maybe you have them at 6 inches for a particular crop one season, going in this one bed or this one row, and you need to move it to another place in your garden. You can change the spacing of your emitters and your spaghetti by putting in plugs and then reinserting emitters.
and that points to the fact that we do need to plan our garden ahead of actually having plants and
Yes.
putting seeds in. There's real reasons for doing that.
Yeah, it's sometimes the hardest part.
It is. How do you measure the water pressure?
There's a gauge you can buy. If you're going to put in drip irrigation, I would suggest getting that gauge. You can put it right on the hose bib, and it'll tell you what the pressure is.
It's pretty inexpensive, and even if you're not doing irrigation, it's an excellent little tool to have around your house.
Yes.
It's a good thing to have.
I've got one.
Can you explain more about how to flush the distribution tubes?
Okay, what you usually do in that situation is your tube goes like to the end of a row or the end of the bed, and there's a plug on the end. Sometimes you bend over some people recommend bending over the end of the tube, and there's a little clamping clip that you can put on it, and that keeps it from losing water when you're running your irrigation system. And then you can take that off and flush it out with a hose before you start your irrigation for the season or periodically during the season. Other people suggest, and I think it's better, is you can install a cap. You can remove the cap, twist cap, a screw cap, but you can put the fitting in at the end of the hose, and then it's a lot more convenient. It's less wear and tear on your tubing. And then you just run water through it. All the dirt and debris and sand or whatever come out, and then you just put it back and then and run your tubes.
I had a question that goes along with that. Is flushing the distribution tube the same as blowing it out at the end of the season?
Blowing it out at the end of the season usually is done for a different reason.
Okay,
It's done primarily to keep water out of your system for the colder months. Because of course water expands, like even if you had, your hand sprinkler on your hose and you didn't have it open so water could drain out, when it freezes, it'll damage your sprinkler, your hand sprinkler. The same thing will happen to your supply lines for your drip irrigation. It could crack the pipe, the tubing, and it could damage it. So blowing it out in the end of the season is a protective thing. It's not really to protect the emitters from dirt. That you do before you start your season.
okay. And is blowing it out, does it really mean just blowing in the tube?
You can.
I've always wondered how that was. I've had someone else do it every year, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can do it. I mean, it's, it's not hard. I mean, we blow a balloon. But if you happen to have an air supply or something, you don't really need to do that because that's much higher pressure than the system even uses during its operation. So the pressure that you get from blowing with your mouth would be fine.
Okay. Next question. Does the exposed tubing wear out faster if buried due to sun exposure?
Does it wear out faster?
I think she's saying, is it, if it's not buried, does it wear out faster because of sun?
I've not heard that it does. It's designed to function in the sun. It's the design of the plastic is it's not supposed to be what's the word? Can't think of the word.
Vulnerable?
Vulnerable. I love that word. Thank you. It's not supposed to be as vulnerable to UV radiation. But if you bury it, it might extend its life a little bit, but it's designed to be on the surface. Every system that I've worked on and seen, it's primarily on the surface because some of the things we mentioned in terms of flexibility, ease of finding leaks and repairing things and just moving it around. It's designed that way.
Lauren made a comment right after this and said last year pack rats chewed up much of her irrigation spaghetti tubing to build nests, which is obviously one of the reasons you'd want to bury it. So the pack rats or my puppy doesn't chew it up.
It is possible to bury it under those circumstances. It might be a good idea. You can also consider doing, well, I don't know if PVC, which is much more rigid and thicker walled, they may not be able to chew that as well as the spaghetti, and you can bury that as well. You can put the emitters or drill holes. If you know how much pressure is in your system, you can drill very small holes and get basically make the PVC pipe both the supply tube and an emitter by drilling holes and bury that underground. But then you have to remember where the holes are when you start planting.
Well, we've reached the end of our questions, folks. Did you have anything else that you'd like to post in chat? This has been very informative. I'm delighted that Bill put this together for us. We will be having our next quarterly presentation coming up in October. I believe it's going to be on garlic. We have a master gardener who has been growing garlic in the Chino Valley area for well over I believe, 30 years. And so I believe she's going to be presenting to us, fingers crossed. But if we have no other questions, we want to thank you for being with us and look forward to seeing you again. This video will be posted on our website in 2 to 3 days, so you can look for it, send it to your friends. Thanks.
Thank you.